Welcome to TalkTensors. I am so glad you're joining us today for a brand new deep dive into the absolute bleeding edge of machine learning research. Because honestly, what if the way we've been trying to make AI safe for the last 5 years is just fundamentally backward?
It's a huge question.
Yeah.
And yeah, it totally sounds counterintuitive, especially if you come from a traditional software engineering background. We are so used to the idea that if a system misbehaves, you just, write a stricter rule to govern it.
Right, you patch it with a new line of code.
Exactly. But the research we're examining today points to this massive fundamental flaw in how we handle artificial intelligence alignment. We keep trying to write the perfect system prompt, the perfect set of instructions, and we just keep failing when the model hits the real world.
And when we say alignment, just to set the stage for you listening, we are talking about the absolute holy grail of modern tech right now. We have these incredibly powerful language models, and the defining challenge of our time is figuring out how to guarantee they act appropriately.
Especially in highly subjective, socially complex situations.
Right. Because how do you teach a machine to moderate a massive online forum or, gracefully refuse a harmful prompt without just lobotomizing the model so it refuses to answer anything at all?
You really hit on the core tension there. Because if you make the model too safe, it becomes completely useless to the user. But if you make it too helpful, it becomes dangerous. And the prevailing paradigm in alignment research today to solve this, the status quo basically, is something called constitutional grounding.
Constitutional grounding, like constitutional AI, right?
Yeah, exactly. You've probably heard of constitutional AI. The core philosophy there is that we try to align an artificial intelligence by giving it a list of high-level rules or principles, a constitution.
So we literally just write down things like, do not be toxic, or remove low-effort posts, or be helpful and harmless. And we just expect the model to use those abstract rules to ground its decisions.
That's the idea. And on paper, a constitution sounds incredibly logical. I mean, we use them for human governments, right? So why not algorithms?
Yeah, but human governments have lawyers arguing for years over what one sentence means.
Exactly. And that is the problem. Words are inherently fuzzy. The inconsistencies in how these constitutional rules are specified, and more importantly, how they're interpreted by different people or different AI models, it leads to completely unpredictable decisions.
Because a rule is just an abstraction.
Right. When you tell a system to keep it civil, you are relying on a shared understanding of what civil actually means. But that shared understanding doesn't actually exist at scale on the internet.
Wait, let me stop you there and play devil's advocate for a second. Because rules are the foundation of literally every system we build. In software engineering, in mathematics, a logic gate is a rule. If a human engineer can't write a precise rule for what is and isn't allowed, how can we expect an AI to just magically know what we want?
Well, because a logic gate deals with binary states, ones and zeros. Human social dynamics do not. The flaw in high-level guidelines comes down to the sheer ambiguity of human language. Civil is a subjective, socially established criterion.
It's a vibe.
Yeah, it's a vibe. And the interpretation of that single word varies wildly across different cultures, different demographics, and even different sub-communities on the exact same website. What constitutes a personal attack to one person might constitute a completely friendly joke to another.
So we're basically trying to play a game where the rulebook is written in invisible ink, and the ink changes color depending on who is reading it.
That is a brilliant way to look at it.
Yeah.
The researchers in this paper highlight a concept they call the locality of preferences. Basically, socially established criteria are fluid and highly localized to specific groups.
Meaning what's okay here isn't okay there.
Right. Think about the difference between, say, a highly competitive gaming community and a health-focused support community.
Oh, wow. The culture clash there would be massive.
Completely opposite ends of the spectrum. In a gaming forum, aggressive banter, trash talk, telling someone they're, absolute garbage at a game, that might be a perfectly normal, accepted part of the culture. It is their local norm.
Right. If you banned that, you'd ban the whole community.
Exactly. But if you take that exact same language and drop it into a community for people discussing a severe medical diagnosis, it is horrifically toxic and abusive.
The exact same words, but completely different alignment targets.
Yes. A single static constitution cannot stretch to cover all those subjective edge cases without breaking. If your central AI rule says no aggressive language, the gaming community gets censored into oblivion. But if you loosen the rules so the gamers can talk trash, the health community gets overrun with toxicity.
So you basically cannot write a universal rule book for human behavior.
You really can't. It means that to achieve true alignment, like to ensure an AI makes decisions that genuinely reflect the will and safety of a specific group, we need a system that adapts to the implicit unwritten rules of that exact group.
We have to capture the localized vibe, not just enforce the text of a universal rule.
Right. Which brings us to the big reveal of today's paper. The researchers propose a completely new framework called case law grounding, or CLG.
Case law grounding. I love the sound of that.
Instead of relying purely on a constitution of abstract rules, we ground the AI's subjective decision-making using past decisions. We essentially treat it like a legal system.
Okay, that makes so much sense. Because how do human courts solve the problem of ambiguous constitutional rules? They don't just rewrite the Constitution every single time there's a disagreement.
No, they rely on hundreds of years of jurisprudence.
Right, they use precedent. It's like, okay, imagine trying to learn a ridiculously complex European board game just by reading the dense 50-page manual. You're just staring at all these abstract rules about resource allocation and turn phases, and you have literally no idea how the game actually plays.
That's constitutional grounding.
Yes, but case law grounding is like just watching your friends play 3 hands at the game. You instantly understand the unwritten rules, the meta, the whole vibe. You get it immediately because you see the rules applied in a highly specific context.
You are absorbing the localized norms through precedent. In law, this is the principle of stare decisis, which is a Latin term meaning to stand by things decided. They let past decisions guide current ones.
So if a law is vague, lawyers and judges just look at how previous courts handled similar specific scenarios. The past facts anchor the present ambiguity.
Exactly. But that leads to the obvious question, right? If vague rules are failing because every subcommunity has a different definition of toxic, and human society solved this centuries ago with case law, how do we actually teach an AI to learn that local vibe?
Right, because an AI can't read a filing cabinet. It doesn't have paralegals to go dig through archival court documents in a basement somewhere. How do we mathematically build an AI legal system?
The paper breaks this down into 3 really concrete steps. And you're totally right. We have to translate the analog human process into a digital mathematical one.
Okay, walk me through it.
Step 1 is case retrieval. In human law, this is basically the discovery phase. Lawyers use vast, complex indices and databases like Westlaw or LexisNexis to find relevant past cases based on commonalities in jurisdiction or circumstance.
But a human lawyer uses their brain to know that a past case about a stolen bicycle might be legally relevant to a new case about a stolen skateboard. How does the AI make that conceptual connection without just literally searching for the keyword bicycle?
It uses semantic similarity via text embeddings. Specifically, the researchers used off-the-shelf general-purpose models. They actually mention using OpenAI's text embedding 3 large model for this step.
Okay, let's break that down for a second, because semantic similarity via text embedding sounds like a serious MLOps buzzword. If I'm understanding this correctly, we aren't just doing a fancy Google keyword search. We're mapping meaning.
We are mathematically locating the contextual vibe of a text.
Let's use a tangible analogy for you listening just to visualize this. Imagine you have a massive blank 3D graph, and we want to plot recipes on it. The x-axis is how sweet the recipe is. The y-axis is how salty it is, and the z-axis is how spicy it is.
Okay, I'm with you.
If I plot a chocolate cake, it goes way out on the sweet axis. If I plot a brownie, it lands right next to the chocolate cake. They are physically clustered together in that space. But if I plot a spicy taco, it lands on the complete opposite side of the graph.
That is actually a very accurate way to visualize it, except instead of just sweet, salty, and spicy, an embedding model like text embedding 3 large uses thousands of dimensions.
Thousands.
Yeah, thousands. It plots the core concept of the text across thousands of different abstract axes of meaning.
So we take every single past decision, like every moderated comment, every rated post, and we run it through this embedding model. We plot every past action in this massive multidimensional space.
Right. And then when a brand new case comes in, say a user flags a comment for being toxic, we plot that new comment on the exact same graph.
Oh, and we just measure the distance.
Exactly. We measure the physical mathematical distance between the new case and all the old cases. In this multi-dimensional space, we use a metric called cosine distance.
Cosine distance?
Yeah, it measures the angle between the lines drawn from the origin to those points. Basically, the smaller the angle, the closer the texts are in meaning. The closer the past case is to the current case, the more semantically similar the circumstances are.
And that gives us our pool of potentially relevant precedents.
Yes, that's step 1. But wait, just because something is similar in text doesn't mean it's actually a precedent.
Oh, right, because two cases might both involve a car crash, so their text embeddings would land right next to each other on the graph.
Yeah.
But what if one crash was caused by a drunk driver and the other was caused by a faulty city traffic light?
Exactly. The text is similar, but the legal application is entirely different.
Right. One is a criminal issue and one is a municipal liability issue.
That is a critical distinction, and it's exactly why you can't just retrieve cases and blindly apply them. Which brings us to the second step of the methodology, precedent selection.
Applying the law.
Right. In the legal realm, you don't just dump a pile of vaguely similar cases on a judge's desk and say, figure it out. You have to explicitly argue why a past case applies to the present one. You have to either adopt it or distinguish it.
Okay. Adopt, meaning the core mechanism is the same, so the past ruling applies, and distinguish, meaning there are critical factual differences, so it doesn't apply. But how on earth does an AI do that? That requires actual human reasoning.
The researchers implemented this primarily through LLM prompting. They take the current case and the retrieved past case and feed them both into a language model. In the paper, they primarily use the GPT-4 Turbo preview for this.
Okay.
And they used chain of thought prompting to evaluate the match.
Chain of thought. The magic words of modern AI. Let's unpack what that actually does here, because we aren't just asking the model for a quick yes or no.
Right. If you just ask an LLM, is case A a precedent for case B, it might just hallucinate a quick answer based on surface level similarities. Oh, they both mention cars. Yes.
Which is exactly what we want to avoid.
Exactly. So chain of thought forces the model to explicitly reason step by step. The prompt essentially commands the AI. Compare the factual circumstances of this past case to the current case. Identify the core reason the past case was decided the way it was. Does that exact same core reason exist in the current case? Think step by step before answering.
So it forces the AI to objectively compare the factual aspects of the two scenarios before deciding if it's a valid precedent. It decouples the judgment process from a quick vibe check and turns it into a rigorous comparative analysis.
Precisely. And once the system has filtered out the false matches and selected the true applicable precedents, it moves to the third and final step, decision synthesis.
The final judgment.
The final judgment. The system simply looks at how the adopted precedents were previously decided and adopts the consensus. Stare decisis in action.
So we view the previous judgments as a reliable source of truth. If 3 past cases exactly match the current scenario, and all 3 resulted in a human moderator deleting the post, the AI just deletes the new post.
Exactly.
But what happens when the legal history disagrees with itself? What if the LLM selects 4 valid precedents, and 2 of them were keep the post, and 2 were remove the post?
That happens all the time in messy real-world data. So the paper outlines a highly deterministic tie-breaking mechanism. Primarily, they use a deterministic approach based on approval voting.
Taking the most common decision.
Right. Taking the mode among the selected precedents. But if there is a dead tie, like your 2-to-2 example, they break it by prioritizing the precedent that had the closest retrieval distance in the embedding space back in step 1.
Oh, that's clever. So whichever precedent is mathematically, semantically closest to the new case wins the tie.
Exactly. It mirrors how a human judge might weigh a Supreme Court ruling slightly heavier than an appellate court ruling, but here, the weight is purely based on the mathematical proximity of the context.
It creates a fully automated, mathematically grounded legal system for AI decisions.
It really does.
Okay, so the theory is beautiful. It makes perfect logical sense. But a theory in a white paper is only as good as its empirical evidence in the real world. How did the researchers actually prove that this case law grounding works better than just giving the AI a traditional list of rules?
To prove it, they needed testing arenas that were highly subjective and deeply reliant on that localized social context we talked about earlier. So they chose 2 massive decision-making domains: content moderation and toxicity rating.
Okay, for content moderation, the task was binary, right? Just keep or remove decisions on real Reddit comments. And for toxicity rating, it was a scalar task rating social media posts on a scale of 1 to 5 for how toxic they are.
Yes.
Useful.
And we should probably clarify the nature of these data sets before we go further.
Yes, absolutely. Before we dig into the specific communities they tested, a quick but very necessary note for you listening. These data sets inherently contain politically charged, controversial, and sometimes deeply offensive content.
Very much so.
We are talking about heated debates over COVID-19 policies, online harassment, and highly toxic internet culture. I want to explicitly state that we are purely looking at the mathematical and alignment mechanics here today. We are not endorsing any of the original viewpoints present in the data, nor are the researchers.
Right, we are strictly evaluating how well the AI alignment mechanism functions against a given historical data set.
Exactly. The content itself, however pleasant or unpleasant, is simply the raw material needed to test the alignment mechanism.
Well said. And a truly test if case law grounding solves that locality of preferences problem. The researchers didn't just look at the data sets as one massive monolithic block. They fractured the data into specific demographic and community splits, 5 distinct groups in total.
But why fracture it? If you have a million posts, why not just test the AI on all of them at once?
Because a single massive user base doesn't have one single opinion. If you want to know if an AI can adapt to a local vibe, you have to isolate the local vibe.
Oh, wait.
So for the toxicity data set, they used demographic splits based on the human annotator's prior life experiences. They tested one group of people who have seen toxic content online, but haven't been personally targeted by it. Then they tested a completely separate group of people who have been personally targeted by toxic content.
Okay, that makes total psychological sense. Because someone who has been a victim of targeted online harassment is going to have a fundamentally different and likely much more sensitive internal threshold for what counts as a 5 out of 5 on the toxicity scale compared to just a casual observer.
Exactly.
If you mash their data together, you lose the nuance.
Precisely. You end up with an unhelpful average. And then for the moderation data set, they isolated 3 specific subreddits, each with wildly different cultures and rules. They looked at R Games, which is a broad gaming community focused on news and discussion, R Coronavirus, which is highly moderated for scientific accuracy and public health guidelines, and then Rivet the Asshole.
The Wild West of subjective moral judgment. For anyone unfamiliar, Am I the Asshole is this massive community where people post highly personal, interpersonal drama and basically ask the crowd to judge who is at fault. It is purely driven by emotion and social opinion. I love that they included that one as a stress test.
It's a perfect stress test. So the experimental setup was essentially a head-to-head battle. They recruited human participants from a survey platform called Prolific and directly from those specific Reddit communities. And they also set up the GPT-4 Turbo LLM.
So humans versus AI.
So humans and AI versus the ground truth. Both the humans and the AI were tested to see if they could look at new posts and match the historical ground truth decisions of these specific communities. Half the time, the humans and the AI were given the traditional list of rules, the standard community guidelines. The other half, they were given the case law grounding system, armed with past precedents.
Rules versus precedent. The ultimate showdown for the future of AI safety. And the results. I mean, when I read this section of the paper, my jaw actually dropped. The data here is striking. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It represents a massive leap forward. Case law grounding outperformed traditional rules in 4 out of the 5 groups tested.
And it wasn't just like a marginal 1% improvement. For the human annotators using the case law tool instead of the rule book, they saw a 16.0 to 23.3 percentage point jump in their accuracy at matching the community's true decisions.
Which is huge for humans.
Right. But the AI, the LLM, saw an even crazier 20.8 to 32.9 percentage point increase.
A nearly 33-point jump in alignment accuracy just by changing the grounding mechanism from abstract rules to concrete precedents. That is a paradigm-shifting result. It completely validates the hypothesis that abstract rules are failing us at scale.
Let's analyze the why here. Why does the language model improve so drastically with case law?
If we look at how large language models are built, it makes perfect sense. These models are pre-trained on the broad, messy entirety of the internet. So by default, their baseline behavior naturally regresses to the mean of human behavior. They are the ultimate generalists.
So if you ask a base model to moderate a forum, it's going to moderate it like an average internet user, whatever that means. It's going to apply a vanilla, universally inoffensive standard.
Exactly. But community moderation isn't about being average. It's about enforcing a highly specific, localized norm. When you just give the LLM a generic rule like no harassment, it interprets that rule through its broad, generalized pre-training. It thinks, well, what does the whole internet consider harassment?
But case law acts as a powerful localized anchor.
Yeah.
When you force the model to look at 5 specific comments that this exact community deleted yesterday, you are forcing it to override its generic pre-training. You're aligning it precisely with the nuances of a micro-community. It's like taking a lawyer who just passed the general bar exam and immediately handing them the last 10 years of a specific small town's court records. They instantly know how this specific judge in this specific town interprets the law.
The precedent bridges the gap between the model's generalized weights and the community's localized preferences. It gives the AI contextual memory.
Okay, but we have to talk about the elephant in the room.
The outlier.
The outlier. The data showed that case law grounding crushed the rule-based approach in 4 out of 5 groups. We cannot ignore the 5th group. What happened there?
The mystery of Ramethesol. In that specific community, case law grounding did not show statistically significant improvements over just using rules.
Wait, really? Did the AI's legal system just completely fail?
The LLM's accuracy was slightly higher with CLG, but mathematically speaking, it wasn't a significant leap. It's a fascinating anomaly, and the researchers synthesize a hypothesis for this. It has everything to do with the sociological nature of that specific community. Think about the core function of Ramethesol.
Okay.
It is an inherently permissive, highly subjective space. Users post complex, deeply personal, and often completely fabricated stories about their lives.
It's reality TV in text form. People go there for the drama.
Precisely. And because it exists essentially for entertainment, the community's internal criteria for what gets removed by moderators is purely vibe-based and purposely embraces ambiguity. They want the messy, borderline offenses cases because that drives engagement and debate. The moderation is inherently inconsistent by design.
This is a huge realization, because if a community actively thrives on inconsistency and subjectivity, a precedent isn't actually a precedent.
Right. If the underlying culture is we allow almost anything unless it crosses some invisible, constantly moving line of outrage, then concrete historical precedents lose all their grounding power. You can show the AI 5 past cases, but if the community's own moderation history is essentially random or highly lenient based on the mood of the day, the AI cannot extract a reliable mathematical signal.
Because case law requires the assumption of stare decisis, that past decisions represent a coherent truth.
Exactly. If the past decisions are basically a coin toss, a history of coin tosses doesn't help you predict the next coin toss.
That is profound. It implies that AI alignment isn't just a math problem or an engineering problem. It is fundamentally a sociological problem. You can only align an AI to a community that actually has a coherent identity to begin with. If the humans don't know what the rules are, the machines certainly can't figure it out.
The failure of the tool in that one specific instance actually proves the underlying thesis. AI behavior is entirely dependent on the structural integrity of the human data we feed it.
Incredible. Okay, but it's not enough to just know that case law grounding works in theory. If we are going to deploy this safely in production AI, if this is going to be running in the background of global social media platforms or corporate chatbots or autonomous agents, we have to understand the precise configuration that makes it thick. We need to look at the ablation studies.
Yes, an ablation study is crucial in machine learning. It's where researchers systematically remove or alter parts of a system to see what makes it break, which tells you which parts are actually doing the heavy lifting. And one of the most important variables they tested here was the K parameter.
The retrieval window size.
Exactly. When the system retrieves past cases in step 1, how many should it look at? 1, 3, 15. They tested K equals 1, 3, 5, 10, and 15.
You'd instinctively think more is always better, right? To just give the AI the entire library of past cases to read.
You would think so, but computational cost and latency are massive factors in production AI. You can't have a model read 10,000 cases every time a user posts a comment. It would take hours and cost a fortune in compute. You want the smallest K possible that still gives you high accuracy. And the researchers found that accuracy eventually plateaus. After a certain point, bringing in more past cases doesn't help because they are too semantically distant from the current case. They aren't relevant anymore.
But they also found a severe danger at the low end of that spectrum, didn't they?
A significant danger. Relying on a tiny window like just K equals 1 or K equals 3 makes the system highly unpredictable. In a few instances, accuracy actually dropped with very small retrieval windows.
Why would looking at one precedent be worse than looking at 0? That doesn't make sense.
Because of human anomalies. Imagine you only look at one past case. What if that one past case was a mistake? What if a human moderator was tired that day or biased or just accidentally clicked the wrong button?
Oh, wow.
If your AI bases its entire legal reasoning on a single faulty precedent, the whole system veers off course. It hallucinated a rule that doesn't exist. You need a sufficient neighborhood of past cases, a larger K value, to smooth out those human errors and find the true consensus.
You need enough precedents to form a jury, essentially. A single judge might be corrupt or tired, but a jury of past decisions reveals the truth.
That's a perfect analogy.
Now, here is a pivotal question, and it's something the researchers specifically tested, which I found fascinating. What if we just gave the AI the constitutional rules, but showed it a few past cases as inspiration, like just as examples of how the rule was applied? Do we really need this strict, rigid, multi-step, stare decisis mechanism where the past cases literally dictate the final outcome?
This brings us to perhaps the most critical finding in the entire paper: the difference between binding precedents versus mere examples. In the ablation study, they ran a test where both human annotators and the LLM showed the past cases, but weren't strictly forced to derive their final decision from them. The precedents were non-binding. They were just offered as helpful context alongside the rules.
And what happened to the accuracy?
The accuracy plummeted. Using non-binding precedents resulted in no statistically significant improvement over just using basic rules.
Wait, really? None at all. Providing context didn't help.
None. The 16 to 32 point jumps in accuracy only happened when the precedents were binding, when the system was structurally forced to derive the decision directly and exclusively from the adopted past cases, ignoring the abstract rule entirely.
Let's unpack the psychology of that, because that is wild. Why does an example fail where a binding law succeeds?
It comes down to confirmation bias and the elasticity of human rationalization. And interestingly, LLMs suffer from a mathematical version of this exact same bias. If you give a human or an AI running a generalized prompt, an ambiguous rule, and then you show them a past example, they will often bend their interpretation of the example to fit their pre-existing subjective bias about the rule.
Oh, I see. Let's say I'm a moderator. My internal bias is that a specific comment should be deleted because it offended me personally. You show me an example of a very similar comment from last week that was kept up. Instead of changing my mind, I'll just rationalize it away. I'll say, well, that past comment was kept, but this new comment is slightly more aggressive, so the rule still says delete it. I use the ambiguity of the rule to override the reality of the example.
Exactly. The human, or the generalized LLM, retains its subjective power to interpret the abstraction however it wants in the moment. Only by making the precedent binding, by structurally forcing the decision pipeline to adopt the consensus of the past cases and removing the subjective interpretation of the rule entirely, does the alignment accuracy actually skyrocket.
So you have to take the decision out of the abstract realm of interpretation and lock it into the concrete realm of historical fact.
You do.
That is a staggering insight into both human psychology and machine learning architecture. You can't just suggest the right path to an intelligence, you have to pave it. It fundamentally challenges how we've been trying to align models for the last few years. We've been trying to teach these models philosophy and ethics when we should have been teaching them case law.
It completely reframes alignment from a problem of instruction to a problem of precedent retrieval.
Which brings us to the end of our analysis. And as our deep dive winds down, it is time to look beyond the paper itself. It's time to peer into the slightly terrifying, highly fascinating future of AI alignment. And you know what that means? It's time for our Novel Notions segment.
Here we go.
Now, I must explicitly state to you, the listener, this segment is entirely speculative. We are taking the rigorous math and mechanics we just discussed and projecting them into extreme future scenarios. This is strictly for entertainment purposes only.
I'll start us off. If we assume that future production AI systems like the massive LLMs moderating global social media or handling corporate data security adopt case law grounding because of its massive accuracy boosts, we are introducing a terrifying new attack vector. I call it adversarial precedent poisoning.
Ooh, sounds sinister. Walk me through how an attacker pulls this off.
Well, if the AI's safety mechanism relies entirely on retrieving past decisions from a database, then the database is the model's morality. It's the source of truth. If a malicious actor understands this, they don't need to hack the model's weights. They don't need to try and break through a firewall. They just need to execute a slow drip data poisoning attack on the case law itself.
How do they do that practically?
By submitting thousands of perfectly crafted borderline prompts over a long period of time. Prompts that are just barely safe enough to get approved by human moderators or the current edge case safety filters. Over months, these actors successfully get these borderline cases marked as safe and embedded into the retrieval database.
Because they technically didn't break the Constitution? They walked right up to the line and didn't cross it, so the system logs it as a lawful, safe interaction.
Right, but mathematically, slowly, they are shifting the center of gravity in the embedding space. They are creating a massive cluster of legally approved precedents right on the edge of dangerous territory. Once enough of these poisoned precedents exist, the attacker can submit a truly harmful, unsafe prompt. The AI goes to retrieve precedents, sees that cases very close to this new harmful prompt were consistently approved in the past, and applies stare decisis. The AI legally justifies wildly unsafe outputs based on a fabricated history of precedents.
That is chilling. You are essentially gerrymandering the AI's moral landscape over time. It's a slow-motion jailbreak that the system views as completely legally sound.
Exactly. The very mechanism that aligns it to a community can be hijacked to misalign it globally if you control the history it learns from.
Okay, my turn. My novel notion builds on that exact architecture, but from a defensive posture. If case law grounding is the future, I pitch a new global alignment structure, the autonomous AI Supreme Court.
A hierarchical alignment architecture. I like where this is going. How does it work?
Right now, we have these massive frontier models trying to do everything at once, but what if we split the legal system just like we do in human government? Out on the edge, on every user's phone, every local server, in every single app, you have tiny, fast, highly efficient edge models. They process trillions of micro decisions a day using basic rules and a cached database of local precedents. But they are bound to make mistakes or encounter truly novel situations where no precedent exists.
The unprecedented cases, the weird edge cases of human behavior that haven't been mapped yet.
Exactly. When a user feels they were wrongly censored or a prompt is flagged as a 50-50 edge case and the local precedents are tied, it gets appealed. The prompt is sent up the chain to a massive, incredibly slow, ultra-high parameter model sitting in a centralized server cluster, the Supreme Court LLM.
And what does this Supreme Court model do that the edge model couldn't?
It doesn't just retrieve cases. It engages in deep, multi-agent analogical reasoning. It spawns sub-agents to argue both sides of the prompt. It debates itself based on the entire historical dataset of human interaction. It spends minutes, maybe hours of compute to reach a consensus. And then it issues a landmark ruling.
A new, universally binding precedent.
Yes. And the moment that landmark ruling is finalized, it is instantly mathematically embedded and distributed via the cloud to all the edge models globally. It instantly rewrites the safety behavior of the entire network without the company needing to spend $10 million on a massive retraining run. It becomes a living, breathing, globally updated immune system based entirely on machine jurisprudence.
That is a highly plausible architecture. It mirrors the efficiency of human governance, delegating the easy stuff to lower courts and elevating the hard stuff, but it operates at the speed of light.
It's the ultimate synthesis of human law and machine logic.
But if the future of AI alignment is indeed going to be governed by the legal weight of past decisions, whether through an AI Supreme Court or localized case law databases, it raises a deeply important, almost philosophical question for the researchers and engineers building these systems today.
What's that?
If the machine's entire concept of right and wrong is derived from the first set of precedents it is given, who gets to decide the very first precedent?
Oh, wow.
Because whoever casts the first stone shapes the trajectory of the machine's entire moral universe. A single human bias, baked into a single early decision, could ripple outward, embedded forever in that high-dimensional space we talked about, silently governing the decisions of AI systems for decades to come.
We started this hour wanting a clean, binary engineering view of AI alignment, but what we got is a mirror reflecting our own messy, subjective history back at us. The machine is only as aligned as the past we choose to feed it. Thank you for joining the deep dive. If you want to explore the mathematics of case law grounding yourself, we highly encourage you to check the link in the description for the full paper from the researchers. Until next time, keep questioning the rules, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.